The president bemoans unfair perceptions of Guyana, says Guyana is open for business and willing to work with others to attract investment. And the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, William Warren Smith, meets the Guyanese head of state. These and other stories in this week's edition of The Diary, the Government Information Agency program that provides a recap of the highlights of the country's president for the week June 22 to 28. I am your host, Fabian Klaus. Now for the details. Concerned by the way in which corruption is being perceived in the government and the Guyanese society, the head of state sought to respond to critics who have been fueling the notion. As stakeholders gathered at the Guyana International Conference Center for the investment conference organized by the diplomatic community, the notion of corruption was once again brought to the fore. Canadian High Commissioner David Devine, in his remarks, said corruption is an impediment to ethical and conscious investors who are considering business opportunities in Guyana. But President Ramotar, who is known for his no-tolerance pronouncements on corruption, is not happy by the way in which the government's efforts to fight corruption has been downplayed.
We know that we have corruption in our society, but what is not recognized is all the procedures and processes that we have put in place to fight corruption in Guyana. Before we came to office, there was no tendering system in our society. All our tenders are open, published openly. Many of what is reported sometimes in the press about secret deals. Some of these things have been advertised in the very paper that sometimes repeat this nonsense.
The procurement system in Guyana that the opposition wants scrapped and replaced by a national procurement commission was strengthened with the passage of the 2003 Procurement Act, paving the way for the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board that evaluates tenders and implements policies in accordance with the regional and international standards. It was part of the effort to promote accountability, transparency, competitiveness, and economic growth. Corruption was vociferously debated in a 7-part series on the National Communications Network last year, where politicians in the government and the opposition faced off on the topic. The president believes that an overview of the program would show that government's arguments on corruption were vindicated.
We even organized a public discussion on the television, 7 programs, and none of these programs were any strong, entrenched corruption was ever established. And we're ready to do it again. We're ready to do it again for anyone who's doubtful, that we're ready to talk and be very open on all of these subjects. All we hear about when we challenge and argue on these things, people tell us about perception. I would be the first to admit that maybe our public relations is not as good as others, but replication of some of these things, perception themselves are engineered and manufactured, and the reputation of these things can have serious harm in our society because they can be self-fulfilling prophecies sometimes.
In many of the president's public remarks on corruption, one clarion call has constantly been made. That is for society to help in stamping out the scourge by reporting it wherever it is spotted. On the point of being unfairly criticized, the head of state turned his attention to the Trafficking in Persons TIP U.S. State Department report, which has constantly been downplaying Guyana in its efforts to tackle the issue. The recently released Trafficking in Persons 2013 U.S. State Department report was bad news for Guyana, placing the country on the Tier 2 watch list. The Tier 2 watch list is a ranking for countries whose governments fail to fully comply with the minimum standards in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, but are making significant efforts to bring themselves into compliance. Given the lower grade Guyana has constantly been awarded, the report this year came as no surprise, but for President Ramotar and the government, another unfair ranking.
Year after year, the report fails to take into account of Guyana's realities. Year after year, the report is inconsistent in its method of ranking our country. Year after year, the report fails to take account Guyana has to submit. We are unfairly judged and unfairly ranked. Here again we see how subjective and unfair positions can harm the reputation of our country. And I must say reputation is extremely important in attracting investment in our society.
The disappointment also stemmed from the fact that Guyana was on Tier 2 last year, and according to President Ramotar, had done nothing differently to be graded lower.
Our officers now have a better capacity, yet this year we have been downgraded. All of these things I think will have an impact on the investment climate in our country. And as I said, I don't believe that a lot of it is true, or the information that we pass seems to not be used, and where some of the information that finds itself in the report comes from is all left to be seen.
The criticisms Guyana has been getting for trafficking in persons are similar to those that have been attributed to the country in the U.S. State Department Human Rights Report, which this year offered both praises and criticisms regarding Guyana's performance in the categories of respect for integrity of persons, respect for civil liberties, political rights, corruption, and lack of transparency in the government. However, President Ramotar believes that countries with their own human rights challenges should be the last to lecture others. The recent revelations about secret surveillance operations by the U.S. government was a prime example.
We have a free and open society. The media is free and open. We do not interfere in people's privacy. We don't read their names or anything like that. That is an era, I hope, that is past forever in our country. And we believe in the rule of law.
With the ongoing amendments to the anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism legislation just one example, the President believes that Guyana deserves recognition for its efforts to improve the safety and security of society. You are watching The Diary. Thanks for tuning in. More features still ahead. The 2013 National Budget grants exemptions from personal income tax to first-time homeowners whose taxable income goes towards paying interest on mortgage of up to $30 million from a commercial bank or building society.
The 2013 budget will bring substantial relief to property owners. Tens of thousands of low and middle income earners with net property value of below $40 million will no longer be subject to property tax. From 2014, the tax-free threshold for property tax on individuals will change from $7.5 million to $40 million. Pensioners are to receive a 25% increase in their pension, or $12,500 monthly, with effect from May 1. Over 42,500 pensioners are to benefit from this increase. Government will also provide each pensioner with assistance of up to $20,000 per annum to pay GPL for their electricity charges.
Guyana's economy grew by 4.8% in 2012, the seventh consecutive year of positive growth. This expansion was due to the macroeconomic policies put in place by government to protect the local economy and ensure a better life for all Guyanese. Economic growth is projected at 5.3% for 2013. The Alliance for Change, AFC, and the Partnership for National Unity, APNU, cut $5.2 billion in subsidy to the Guyana Power and Light Company. Implications of this cut: higher electricity tariffs for GPL customers, prolonged periods of blackout, hardships for the manufacturing sector, increased costs for goods and services, halting of expansion projects that cater for increased electricity demand, and loss of jobs for Guyanese.
Along with officiating at the commencement of a new chapter in the Guyana leg of the Basic Needs Trust Fund and attending the Investment Forum, the President of the Caribbean Development Bank, William Warren Smith, also paid a courtesy call on the Guyanese head of state. William Warner Smith met the Guyanese head of state in the presence of Guyana's Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashney Singh, after a productive day that included the launch of the 7th cycle of the Guyana leg of the Basic Needs Trust Fund with a $7.1 million allocation that will facilitate services that vulnerable communities can access. Smith, a Jamaican national, was elected president of the CDB in May 2011, replacing Dr. Compton Bourne, former University of Guyana chancellor, who was president of the CDB since 2001. He performed the functions of Director of Finance and Cooperative Planning and Vice President of Operations at the CDB. Smith conceptualized and developed the FinSAC paper that was used by the government of Jamaica as a model to remedy the failed banks and insurance companies during the country's financial crisis in the latter part of the 1990s. He also championed the need for far-reaching internal reforms at the CDB in an effort to improve efficiency, reduce administrative expenses, and enhance special delivery. Actively involved in the CDB for over 28 years, Smith said that from 1970 to 2012, Guyana has been the largest beneficiary, accessing $165 million in SDF loans at 2% interest. He said Guyana has received 12% of the total Basic Needs Trust Fund's 7th cycle funding, the highest amount any country is receiving, a reflection of the CDB's interest in Guyana. With Guyana being touted the investment destination by investors who favor the attractive climate, the President has assured that the government will continue to implement policies that are crucial to driving national development through investing in key sectors, as these are important to economic growth and social development. Within recent years, some of the largest private foreign investments have been made, particularly in the gold and bauxite mining and exploration sectors, with continued interests in forestry. Movietong in Trinidad and Tobago is interested in establishing its first offshore branch in Guyana, while Jamaican billionaire Michael Leachin and his partner Patrick Hilton, the managing director of the island's National Commercial Bank, came to Guyana recently in search of investment opportunities. In a country that was ranked second to Haiti as a heavily indebted poor country in the 1990s, is now an investment destination. President Ramotar told stakeholders gathered at the Guyana International Conference Center for an investment forum how exactly Guyana arrived at such a prestigious position.
We have been working constantly to improve the conditions and the environment for investment in our country. The government itself has been investing heavily, mainly in infrastructure, to enable great investment in our productive sectors. Since 1992, we have gone a far way in restoring much of the infrastructure that have been destroyed, not only the physical infrastructure, but also social infrastructure, which also is as important as the physical infrastructure themselves. Roads, bridges, buildings have all, much of them have been restored.
Local investors have also been retooling and restructuring their operations to take advantage of new opportunities. A recent study conducted by the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry recently revealed that about 90% of businesses in Guyana have recorded a profit and are comfortable with the business climate.
Today we have international investors demonstrating a strong positive response to the environment that we have established. We have the Blackstone Group, TrueSight, Marriott, Rusal, Bosai, Qualfund, Repsol, Guyana Goldfields, Sand Springs, Reunion Manganese, CGX, among others. And we have also noted that our domestic investors too have been increasing and broadening their investment, and as a result of the positive environment that we have created.
Still optimistic that the country can progress even further, the President said there is still need for much improved infrastructure, like hydropower.
One of the things that has affected us over the years is cheap energy. The need to have cheap energy so that we can develop a stronger manufacturing sector, create more high-paying jobs, and develop new industries depends on cheap energy. And while we are very optimistic that very soon that we will be listed among the oil and gas producers of the world, we are not waiting on that. Because even if we had that, I think it would be a shame if we do not use some of the hydroelectric potential that we have in our society. And that is why the hydroelectric power station that we hope to build together with Site Global is extremely important.
The Amaila Falls Hydro Project is Guyana's medium and long-term strategy for the electricity sector, where about 90% of the country's energy needs will be derived. You're watching The Diary, more still ahead.
The 2013 budget will bring substantial relief to property owners. Tens of thousands of low and middle income earners with net property value of below $40 million will no longer be subject to property tax. From 2014, the tax-free threshold for property tax on individuals will change from $7.5 million to $40 million.
Guyana's economy grew by 4.8% in 2012, the seventh consecutive year of positive growth. This expansion was due to the macroeconomic policies put in place by government to protect the local economy and ensure a better life for all Guyanese. Economic growth is projected at 5.3% for 2013.
Pensioners are to receive a 25% increase in their pension, or $12,500 monthly, with effect from May 1. Over 42,500 pensioners are to benefit from this increase. Government will also provide each pensioner with assistance of up to $20,000 per annum to pay GPL for their electricity charges.
Guyana has received the much-deserving United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization FAO Award for having attained the Millennium Development Goal number 1 and the goal set by the 1996 World Food Summit for halving the absolute number of hungry people by 2050. At an award ceremony in Italy, FAO's Director General Dr. Jose Grazio da Silva said that Guyana had achieved by year-end 2012, 3 years in advance, the target for the number of undernourished people. The government of Guyana has pledged to continue investing in agriculture, expanding safety nets and social assistance programs, along with enhancing income-generating activities to improve the food situation. This is testimony to the efforts of the government to ensure a better life for all Guyanese.
The work of the Red Cross Society locally and how its efforts can be further enhanced as it seeks to offer more services throughout the Caribbean were discussed when President of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, Tereteru Konoi, paid a courtesy call on the Guyanese head of state with a delegation that included the Guyana Red Cross Society Secretary General Dorothy Fraser. Konoi's visit to Guyana is intended to explore ways to deepen the relationship and level of cooperation between the International Federation of Red Cross and Crescent Societies and the Guyana Red Cross Society, which is celebrating 65 years of service in Guyana. Well, that's all in this week's edition of The Diary for the period June 22 to 28. The highlights before we go: the President bemoans unfair perceptions of Guyana. He says Guyana is open for business and willing to work with others to attract investment. And the President of the Caribbean Development Bank, William Warren Smith, meets the Guyanese head of state. Do join us again next week when we bring you more. I am your host, Fabian Klaus. Thanks for joining us, and do have a safe and a pleasant rest of the week.